So there are 4 ways to connect to the Supabase database. First is using the data APIs. What data APIs are? They are interfaces that just allow software applications to communicate and exchange data over the internet. And there are 3 types of data APIs. So we have REST, which interacts with your database through a REST interface or querying in a browser. Supabase provides a RESTful API using the PostgreSQL, which is a standalone web server that turns your PostgreSQL database directly into a RESTful API. But Supabase has done all that for you. Next is GraphQL, which interacts with your database through a GraphQL interface. And lastly is the Realtime, which listens to database changes over WebSockets. Another way to connect to the Supabase database will be connection pooling. Connection pooling is like sharing a small group of reusable database connections among many users. So everything runs smoothly without needing to create a new connection every single time. That we have direct connections using the inbuilt or the built-in Postgres connection system. One example I can think of is using a tool like pgadmin to connect directly to your Supabase database, and then you can run SQL queries to add, update, or delete data without writing a separate program. And lastly, we have using a client library. So in this tutorial, we'll interact with REST through a Flutter client library. So the main parameters to use to initialize Supabase to our Flutter application are the Supabase API URL and the Supabase unknown public key. So we'll get that we just head over to the dashboard again, the menu on the side, and then we head over to project settings, and then we click on API. It will provide us with the API URL and also an unknown public key to use. We just need to copy this and add to our Flutter application. So this far we have come. We can now set up our Flutter application. You can access the starter kit branch that holds the whole design of the car parking application without it does not have the Supabase logic right from GitHub. We won't be designing the app from scratch. I'll leave the link down below. You can take a pause and clone it, and then we can proceed to interact with Supabase from our Flutter application. So here is our Flutter application. So we can just do a quick walkthrough on the lib folder specifically. So let me just close the README. So in our constants, we'll just have 2 files, our config.dat, just it holds our configurations like colors, and also we'll proceed to come here and define our Supabase configurations. Let's just add that. So we're going to define a variable called Supabase URL. And let me just proceed to copy it as I had mentioned before. In project settings API, just proceed to copy it, and then I just paste it here. Then I'll just get the unknown key as well. Supabase unknown key. And just proceed to copy it, and then I just paste it. There we have it. Then so I've already done that, so I'll close this. In the constants is just like some constant things like the app name, the app icon, some very basic stuff. And then next will be the repository folder. This is where our Supabase logic will be. And in this, the starter kit, I've already added an abstract class, which will come and go through. It contains all the methods that represent all the actions that will be done in our Flutter app. And then we have all the screens in the screens folder. Then we have the main.dat, which is the entry point of our application. And then we just have a file called widgets.dat that just holds a widget that will be used commonly in most of the screens over here. So instead of repeating the same code, you just create a file, define a class for it, and then reuse it within the other classes. Okay. So before we do anything, I just want to run this up so that we get to see how it looks like. Then now we dive into the fun stuff. So we can see our app is called Packet, and the first screen that we get to see is a login or the sign-in screen. So we'll have an option where we'll allow the user to enter the email address and the password, and we'll also add the option to be able to sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook. Then we have another option. If the user does not have any account in the system, we allow them to sign up. And when they sign up, they just enter the email address and the password. Remember this, we're not doing authentication here. We just want to store like the email address of the user and other user profile information. Authentication will be done in a different tutorial. So when you click on create account, what it basically does, it goes and inserts this new record, and also it checks if it exists. It will tell you that this account already exists based on the email address, and all you have to do is come back here and sign in. Great. So when in the sign up, we also give the user the option to sign in with Google or Facebook. So let me give an example. Let's start by just entering something. Remember, there's no Supabase logic, yes, but when I click on create, so it will proceed to the email verification. All this is part of the authentication Supabase auth that will a different tutorial. So we allow the user to enter 6-digit codes, and once we enter a few digits to the sixth, it directs us to the third step of the sign up, which is entering your profile details. So the user is able to enter the name and their phone number. Remember, those are some of the 2 columns that are in the profile table. The click to upload car image. This one we'll discuss it when we're talking about Supabase storage. And then there is the enter car model, enter car number, and then you're able to select the various colors, specific color of your car. And then you click on next. You'll proceed to the sign in screen. So what we'll do now, when you click on let's just click on sign in. When you get into the sign in, this is the home screen, and in the home screen, the first tab, you get to view a list of parking areas. This is dummy data for now. Remember, we're not interacting with Supabase, but we should be able to read from the parking area table and display the specific parking areas that are stored, and be able to search as well. And when we click on a specific parking area, we get to see more information about this parking area. So we have the parking name, the description, the parking fee, and also the available slots. So you can see that in the moment I click on this, I don't need to proceed to other steps to know if there are actual slots available. If I saw that there are 0 slots available, I just proceed to look for another parking area. So this information is already available for you in the next 2 clicks. And we get to see the ratings and also some images of the parking area. This is just dummy data. And then there's the option to share and also the option to save this parking area as a favorite. We get to implement that. This represents the description of this specific parking area and some amenities, which is another column that, if you remember, that's in the parking area table. We'll get to populate that. And when you click on proceed, there's a parking details screen. Parking details is when now the user specifies how long they want to park their car and which car they're parking, and they get to see the total parking fee. So the date is actually populated automatically and also the entry time. And then you have to specify the duration of hours, which calculates the exit time by default. Then you get to choose your vehicle. Let's say this part, it's displaying 2 of them, but it should display each one as a single item. And if you do not have a vehicle, you can proceed to add a vehicle here. Great. So then it calculates for you the total parking fee, which currently it's 20. Then you click on proceed. So in the proceed step, we get now to the parking lot, where now we get to see which floors are available and in each floor, which slots are available. Okay. So we still have the information of the parking area just for clarity purposes, and you get to select the specific floor. This is just dummy data. We'll get to see the population, how the screen will look when we populate directly from Supabase, which will be so beautiful. So you get to see the different floors based on the parking lot of a specific parking area. And these are the slots that you'll get to see. And depending on whatever you click, you get to select the parking slot. Okay. Once you can select the parking slot, ideally the next step should be payment, but we're not going to implement that now. And so that you can proceed to pay either with a custom payment method, gateway, or maybe, for example, Stripe and the like, but we're not going to do that. So once we do that, there's then second tab, which is a booking tab. The booking tab shows you the total fee paid so far. So it will automatically do the calculations for us. And then this will be a list of all the bookings that we have made, showing the parking area name and the total parking fee, and also the information like the date and the time. When you click on it, it will also direct you to the parking timer screen, where you get to see the duration. So this timer is just a default timer. We're not going to add any logic on it, but you can play around with it. But the idea is that if you have an ongoing parking, you get to see how many hours, minutes, and seconds you have remaining before the parking session ends. Then we get to see we able to populate a QR code where that you can scan and proceed to do your payments. But I said again, we're not doing payment on this part. So this is the QR code, and it will be able to see all the information about the specific parking that you made. So we have the name of the car, the vehicle number. We also have the parking area, the parking slot, and the time, the duration, and also the total parking fee. And then you click on done. So that's the booking. And then we have the last tab, which is a profile, which displays the user profile information. We'll have the option to upload an image, but this will be on the Supabase storage tutorial. This displays the name of the user and the email address. You're able to view your vehicles here, which will be populated directly from Supabase. Then there's also my favorites, which would also be populated from my Supabase from the favorites table. And lastly, notification, which we won't be doing in this specific tutorial. And then you have the option to log out. So that's how the app looks like basically. So now we can proceed to now add the Supabase logic. So back to our code, I'll proceed to close this. So I'll head over to the repository folder, specifically the abstract class that I talked about. I'll just take you through on all the methods that we'll be working with. So in our abstract class, we'll have a method called create account that will allow us to sign up a new user using the email address. Okay. The build context is because we'll need it in the repository class that we're about to create. Then we have another method called update user profile. Update user profile just updates the profile of an existing user. So some of the user profile information will be name, phone number, car model, car number, car color. Then we have add car profile, where we get to add a new car profile for an existing user. So in this option, this is where initially when you're signing up, at least you should have one vehicle or car. But now in the process, once you log in and you need to add a new car other than the one that you signed up with, you have the option to actually add that new car as we had seen in the interface. Then we have another method called sign in user that allows you to sign in an existing user using the email address. Remember, no extensive authentication here, it's just insertion and selecting. Then we have another method called get parking areas, where we'll get the list of available parking areas and display them on the home tab. We have the search parking area, which searches a specific parking area using the name. We have save as favorite, where we get to save a specific parking area as a favorite for a specific user. Then we have the option to book a parking. We also have an option to view or get all bookings made by an existing user, which is will be displayed in the booking tab. Then we have get my vehicles, where you get to display the list of vehicles for an existing user, which we saw in the profile tab. Get my favorites, which we also got to see in the profile tab. Get my notification, we'll just set it as that because in the future we'll get to interact with that. Remove favorite is another method where we will allow the user to be able to remove a parking area as favorite. And then we also have get available slots for a specific parking area. We get the option to do that. And then if you remember when we're viewing a specific parking area, we get to see how many available slots are there for a specific parking area. This is the method that does that. Then we have get floors by parking lot. So we'll get available floors. If you remember when we go to the parking lot screen, we were able to display the floors. There's a ground floor, first floor. We'll get to do that using this method. Get slots by parking floor. You remember the display of the tiles or the cards that says G1, G2, G3. This is a method that will display now the actual available slots for a specific parking floor in a specific parking lot for a specific parking area. Then we have another method for update slot availability. Remember, if we have availability column in the parking slot table. So if a user decides to book a specific parking, we should set update that availability as false. So that's the method that will do that for us. Then we have get total fee, that will get total amount of parking fee paid by an existing user. Get specific vehicle, where we get information of a specific vehicle using its ID. And then we have get specific slot, where we get information of a specific parking slot using its own ID. We also have get user profile, where we get information of our specific user, where we got to see the name of the user, the email address. And lastly, we have search favorite, where we get to search a specific parking area from the list of favorites that they had set. So these are all the methods that represent all the many actions that we'll have in the mobile app. Now let's head over to the repository folder and create a repository class. We'll name the class parking repository dot. I'll minimize this, let's push this up. Let's start working. So how do we do this? We define the class name, which we'll call parking repository, and then we'll extend the abstract class. Then we'll proceed to add the missing methods, which are 22. And here we have our methods ready. Now let's work on each. But now what I want to do is that instead of just speaking from the first, it will be best if we just started from sign up to the process of signing, then as we go into the app. So we'll start with create account, which is sign up over here. So I'll just search for create account. Here it is. Now let's add a logic over here. I'll just delete all this. There's an important factor that we're missing out on, which is initializing Supabase into our project and also installing Supabase client library. Sorry. So we'll just head over to the terminal first. and then we will install the Supabase client library for Flutter, which is Supabase Flutter. So here it is, Supabase Flutter. Now that we have that, we'll head over to main.dart before we proceed to our repository class. And we're going to initialize the Supabase client. So I'm going to use the widgets Flutter binding, ensure initialized method. The reason I need this is to make sure that whatever code that we're going to add before the run up method is executed before running the run up. So that's what it does. So we're just going to call Supabase, because now we have the package with us, or the library, sorry. And then we call the method initialize, we'll call the method initialize, and then we'll need two parameters. We need to pass in the Supabase URL that is in our constants file, and the anon key, which is Supabase anon key, and we're done. Next thing is now to create a reference to our Supabase client, which will be a singleton, so we'll get to use it through the whole app. So I'll define it as Supabase client and give it the name Supabase is equals to Supabase get the instance dot client. So this is our Supabase client that we'll get to use within the whole application, and it will allow us to interact with Supabase since we have already configured our URL and our anon key. So that's the main part that I hadn't done. Now that we're done with that, we can go back to our repository class now. We have already set up Supabase into our project. So back here, we were in the create account. Let's add logic to this. So how we interact with Supabase, it's like this. So first we need an async and an await operation. Then I'll call my Supabase client, which is in main.dart. Here it is. Sorry. Then we'll proceed to call the method from. So we need to define the table that we want to interact with. So for create account, we'll interact with the profile table. So I'll just add the name profile. The next thing we need to call is the insert method. And then we'll define our values. So the values that we need to insert is just the email address for now. So I'll just define the column name. I think we should proceed to, let's go back to the table so that for clarity purposes. So we're in the public schema, this profile. So we're going to save the email address, and the phone number and the name, we get to update it in the third step of the sign up, if you remember. So if we go back to our code, I'll just write the column name as is, email address, and then I'll set it to email. Let me see. Oh, it's supposed to be an object, a JSON object, like that. Then we close. So that's how you perform an insert statement using Supabase. You specify the table that you want to insert into, and then you define the values that you want to insert. If you have already, and if you remember, we talked about, or we got to play around, try SQL statements in the initial part of the tutorial. You kind of see the relation that is there, because when you're doing an insert statement, you have to specify the table that you want to insert to, define the columns, and then add in the values. So that's all you have to do. So after creating the account, we'll just add now a few things for ourselves. So I just want to get the information that I have inserted. So if it comes back null, that means it was not able to insert. If it comes back with a row, that means we were able to insert this specific record. So I'll assign it to a variable called data. And then I'm just going to do a few checks. So I'm going to say if data is not empty, because it will come in form of a list. Okay, so it will come in form of a list of type map string dynamic. So if it's not empty, I'll proceed to direct the user to the next step. Else, We can return a specific information using the scaffold messenger. And use the snack bar. Define our content. It will be our text. And all we can say is failed to create account. I'll just add if mounted. Okay, and then before I add my if it's successful, I need to add a try and catch here. So that we can handle some exceptions that may come in. So Supabase comes with the specific exceptions. So we have Postgres exception, PostgREST exception, sorry. So let's define when we get specific errors, what do we do? So I'm just going to make sure the context is mounted. And I'm just going to use the same scaffold messenger, but I'll change the message. So I'll just use a switch just to manage the error codes that I'll get. So the specific error codes that are common. So if it's 23505, this means that this account already exists. And then we add a break, proceed to another case. The next case will be the most common, 42501. What this case does is the error that it returns is unauthorized. You don't have permission to access. And this happens a lot when you haven't created policies or you haven't enabled your RLS. Then we'll just add a break. Then we'll have our default. Unknown error. Move const. There we have it. So we just supported a few common error codes that exist. There are more, but those are the ones that I'll set. And then after this, we can add a final catch. And just say an unexpected error occurred. So here is our try and catch. So this is our try, and this is the catch. We're able to use the PostgREST exception to handle some of the exceptions that we may experience. This is a very common error code, and it's usually results because of how you handle the row level security in the tables. So don't be shocked if you experience this. You might find in situations, maybe if you haven't created a specific policy for a specific policy that you're trying to, for specific operation. For example, you're trying to do a select, but you don't have a select policy in that specific table. That's one example. That's why you can get this error code. Great. So we were back to the try, and we're able to insert, and we use the dot select so that it returns for us the record that we have inserted, and it returns a list. So we've said if the list is empty, we say failed to create account, maybe such a message. But if the data is not empty, what do we do? So what we want to do is to proceed to the next step, which is the email verification. So I'll just write that email verification. The roots have already been defined in the main.dot. So just a matter of picking. So this is what the next route we're headed to. So I'm just making sure the context is mounted. And then I use the navigator.push named. And there we have it. So that's all that we're doing. Great. We can proceed to now call this specific method in our sign up screen. So the screen that we're going to interact with is sign up. So we have a section that says we're looking for the button that allows us to sign in a user. So as you can see, because we just had the UI, when we click on sign up, let's proceed to that. If I click on create account, it will direct us to the email verification screen. So what we want to do is that first we check that the user has inserted the values that we need, and then when they click on create account, it performs the operation of insertion, which we'll check, and then directs the user to the email verification screen. So I'll just delete this because that's already managed in the repository class, and I do my check. If our form has a name as a key, just going to use that. Current state, validate. We're validating every text form field. So if it's valid, that's when we proceed to call our repository class and call the method. And what we need is the email. So I'll just get it from text editing controller.text. And then we close that, as simple as that. So the hard logic, we put it on the repository class, and then all we have to do on the UI is just make a call. So let's try and run that and see if we are on the right track. So I'll just refresh this. I already have a failed let's see. I'll need to restart this. So there's our screen. I just needed to refresh. I think it was not able to pick a few things that were configured by Supabase when I installed the library. All I've done is just restarted. Okay, so now let's try and sign in and see. So sign up, sorry. So I'll just enter a name like John Doe at gmail.com. I can insert the password because it checks all the form fields. But we're not saving this. We're not performing authentication. So I'll click on create account. And it has directed us to the email verification. That means it has passed it's in the if statement. It's inside here. So the data that has this data that has come back. So all we have to do is head over to our Supabase and check if there's any record that has been saved. And there we have it. We have John Doe, who has been inserted as ID1. Great. Now let's proceed. So with that, now it directs us to the email verification. We were not working on the email verification. It's not part of this tutorial. So we're able to just insert a few digits and head over now to the profile details screen. So let's work on that. So the profile details screen is in the profile signup.dat. And what this screen allows us to do is to update any other. Now we already have an insertion of a record of a specific user with a unique email address. Now we just want to update some information about this user, which is for example, the name, the phone number, and even enter the car model and the car. They should at least have one vehicle. Okay. So the method that we're going to use will be update user profile in the repository class. I'll just search it, update user profile, and here we have it. Now let's work on this. So I'll just close on that and then we start working. So let's just make it a habit of always having a try and a catch. So I can just copy from the previous one because the exceptions will be just similar. On this part, head down, enter that. So we've sorted that part. Now let's work on the try. We'll add a sync. and then we just call our Supabase client Supabase dot. We want to do an update on which table? We want to do it on the profile table, and then we want to perform which operation? We want to perform an update, and we need to specify our values. Sorry. So some of the values that we need in the profile table, we can only save information about the user. So the user information will be name. Great. And then we'll store the name parameter. And then we'll have the phone number. Just make sure that the column name is equivalent to what we have in the profile table, because the ones that are in quotes represent the column names. And then we'll have phone number. There we have it. And then we just want to make sure we want to do a check where we say wherever we are updating this, the ID column is equals to the specific user ID, which we get whenever you insert a new record or a new account, okay? But now we haven't stored this anywhere. So how will we get this? This is why I think we need state management. So I'll just use this simple, we have provider, we have riverpod, we have getx, we have all this. I'll just use the basic provider to do this. So let me install that quickly. So to get to store that certain information like the user ID within. So I'll just do flutter pub add provider. Done. And I'm just going to create a simple folder here that will handle that. In the lib folder, new folder, provider, then inside it, I say new file, Supabase provider dot. Then inside it, let me minimize that. We just define a simple class and I'll give it the name Supabase provider extends change notifier. And then I'll just have a variable called -user ID. And then we create a getter of type int and give it the name user ID that will refer to our variable at the top. ID. So we want at the point of creating an account, we set this user ID. So there'll be a parameter that will be passed, and then we will initialize it to the user ID. And then we call the notify listener method, and there we have it. So instead of creating a new variable for this class, I'll head over to main.dat and create one singleton for it that we'll get to use within the whole project. So I can create it somewhere here and just say Supabase provider. Give it the name Supabase provider is equals to Supabase provider. So we'll get to use that. So before we finish the update user profile, I'll head back to the create account. We need to add something here. So the moment the user insert, there's an insertion made. Because we still need that information, that's why we're setting it here. But ideally, if the create account, creating a new user involved only one step, we need to set the user ID at the point of login. Okay, that's the ideal way. But now our sign up process revolves 3 steps, and in the last step, we need to update the information that has already been inserted. So we need that user ID of that specific record that was inserted. I hope it makes sense. If the sign up account process involved only one step, we will have just created the account, left the method as is, and then in the point of sign in, we now are, if the sign in is successful, we now store the user ID in the state management. Okay, so just take note that in the method for signing in a user, we'll also set the user ID. So we're not just going to use the one that was used for creating in the process of creating an account. The reason why we need to save it is because we need it for step 3 of the sign up. Okay, so I'll just proceed to now set the user. So I'll just call Supabase provider .set user ID, and we'll get that ID from data. It comes in form of a list, so we need the first index, and then it will come with the different columns. What we need is the ID column. So we have saved that. So our first record won't work out in the part of update because we don't have the user ID. So I'll need to create a new record, but that's fine. We have sorted that part out. So we can be able to proceed to now set the equal method. So what we want is where the ID column is equals to Supabase provider dot user ID. There we have it. And then now we just want to return, call the select. So if information is returned over here using the select method, that means there's a record that has been updated. So we'll just assign this to a variable, and then I do a small check. If data is not empty, no, we don't need to, we need to also update the car information. If you recall, we also have the car model, car number, and the, okay, so we don't need to direct the user anywhere yet. We'll now need to call the next method, which is add car profile. And we'll be passing in the car model, which are already here, the car number, and the car color that were passed. Oh, because of this now, I'll just need to make sure the context is mounted. Great. Fine. So now we have that, and we haven't finished the process. Now we have to go to the add car profile and add this new information, because it's actually new. We are still in the sign up process. So I'll head over here. Once we implement the add car profile, now we can go through the whole process of now doing a whole new sign up of a new user, and we see how that works. Great. So I'll try, and then I'll just pick the catch part block, and then inside here we add a sync. We call an await. Let me just define the variable, because now we are using it, but not everywhere. We call the Supabase client. So we want to do an insertion in the vehicle table. So I'll just say from vehicle. And then we want to perform an insert operation. So now let's specify our values. So we have the user ID. So we'll get it from our provider. We'll need the car model. We'll need the car number. We'll need the car color. There we have it. And then we proceed to do a dot select, so that we see if the information has been saved. So once it inserts and you call the select method, it should return that record that has been inserted. So we do an if data dot is not empty. We now, once they have, we have done with the third process, we need to direct the user to the main page, or the first page, which is the login page. Let me show you. So we need to direct them to this specific route, which will direct them to the login screen, where they'll now log in with their new credentials. So I'll just do a navigator dot push named. Great. So now let's do this whole process and see if our system works. So I'll just do a refresh. The initial record that we have, we didn't manage the state of the ID. So that's why I need us to do it again. Sign up. Let me use janedoe@gmail.com. Just any password, create an account. Just pass in a few digits to direct us to the next place. I'll give it the name Jane and just insert the numbers. We'll skip this part. Give it a car model, a car number like, and then specify the color gray and click on next. We didn't add the, okay. Oh man, we have defined the methods, but we didn't call them on the sign up. Is it the sign up of the specifics? Did I? On next, we didn't add the method that we need to call. That's why it moved so fast. So I'll say parking repository dot update user profile. So we'll need the name, this holds a specific color that the user has selected from the dropdown. And there we have it. That's what we needed. Okay, I'll need to refresh and create a new record. Sign up. I'll give a job@gmail.com. Create account. Wait. Add our 6 digits. Directs us to the profile details. We'll name him job. Give him a phone number like. Give the car model, car number. Select a color. Click on next. We wait. From Supabase, invalid input syntax for type numeric. I think I know what. So let's head over to a table, because car numbers, however much it's a car number, it is a mixture of numbers and text. So I'll need to come here on the vehicle, do an edit. So it's actually valid. We set our car number to numeric instead of our car. So that you can be able to hold car numbers that have a mixture of numbers and letters. So let's click save on that. Great. As you can see, our information has been updated, and also the phone number has been updated and the name. But now the vehicle information was not updated. So that's dirty eco data. I think what I'll do, I'll just delete everything and then we just do it again. Let's try this again. So sign up. I'll give the name Jane Doe at gmail.com. Create account. Pass in 6 digits. Give the user a name, Jane Doe. Set a number, phone number. Define the car model. Car number, nights, bar car, so we can just define it with letters and numbers. Let's select white and click on next. So it has directed us to the login. Let's head back to our tables and see if we are on the right track. So for our profile, we have our Jane Doe who has an ID of 4. If we head over to the vehicle, we now have the vehicle information for the user ID 4. Awesome. Now let's proceed to the next step. So now we're able to sign up the user or insert a new user. So now let's head over to now logging in the user, and we need the method sign in user. Here we have it. So I'll just do a try, and then I'll just proceed to pick, instead of rewriting it over and over again, just pick this, insert it there, async, and then we proceed to call our Supabase client. Let's define a variable, Supabase dot, which table are we interacting with? The profile table. And which operation? Select, because now we're now getting information of a specific user. So we'll do a select, and what are we selecting? We're selecting all the information. So we come in and put a star to mean all, and then we want to check where. The EQ method is equivalent to the where clause in SQL query language. So where the column ID, the column name is ID, and is email address, because that's what the user is inserting, and we pass in the email from the parameter. Great. So we already have a select. So select, if you're using the select operation, it will return a list method. You don't need to add .select here. So we need to do a check. So if the data is empty, let's inform the user of, let's return in something, feedback to the user. Tell them you don't have, that means that email address doesn't exist, sorry. Whoa. You don't have an account. Please proceed to log to sign up. Yeah. And then we do an else if the data.length, because it's a list that's coming back, is equals to 1. Let's store the user ID. So we'll use the Supabase provider dot set user ID to data, get the first index, and get the key ID. And then we just proceed to navigate the user to the home page dot push named home. Else, let's assume there's any other reason why this would fail, which is that does not go to the cache. We'll just inform the user failed to sign in, failed to log in, saved. So there we have our sign in. We're able to get the information. We're using the email address to check. So let's test this. I'll need to call this in our sign login dot. So we'll use the key of the form to come and validate over here. So we'll remove this and do an if dot current state dot validate. If all the forms are valid, that means there's information that has been inserted. I'll just do an async here, call our parking repository class and call our method sign in user, pass in the email address, which is email controller dot text, and close that. Great. So let's try and do set login and see. So we logged in as Jane Doe at gmail.com. Sign in, and we're in. Let's try and enter the wrong information. For example, John at gmail.com. Sign in. So we get the information. You don't have an account, proceed to sign up. So our code is working. Great. Let's head over to the next step, which will be displaying the list of parking areas in the home screen. So inside here, as usual, try. And let me pick my catch. Just one of them. Copy, paste, async, await, Supabase client. So from, we want to pick it from the parking area table, right? But now instead of .from, remember we have two schemas. We have the public and our own custom schema, which is parking. If you're using the public, you just proceed to call the from. But since our table is in our own custom schema, we need to specify the schema. So we call the schema method and specify our schema name, which was parking. And then now that's when we proceed to define the table. So our table is parking area. And then we just want to do a select operation and we want to get all columns. And we're done. So instead of defining this into, because there's nothing much we're doing here, if there's any information in the table, it will return a list. If there's nothing, the list will come empty. So there's no check we're doing over here. So I can just do a return instead of giving it a variable, then returning that variable. So that there we have it. So now let's pass this get parking areas to our home screen. So here's our home screen. Right. So this is just the search. And then this is the container. As you can see, we have default data. So we want to make sure that the correct data is passed. So I'll need to manipulate this part of the list view. I'll use the future builder for this. So just come here and let's just comment this out first. We need the design still, but let's just define the future builder first. So the future will be the parking repository dot get packing areas, and then the builder is now what we'll define. Set the parameters context snapshot. Let's do a return, and our return now will be this. Okay, so we need to get whatever we'll get from the snapshot. So we're expecting a list of type map, of type string, dynamic, and give it the name packing areas is equals to snapshot.data, and if it's nullable, just return an empty list. So we can do our check. I want to add a specific package called empty widget. I tend to use it a lot. So I'll just do new terminal, Flutter pub add empty widget. So that in case the list is empty, it should display that empty widget that just says something like there are no parking areas and the like. So now let me just handle that. So I'm going to do a check. If the parking areas dot is empty, I'll do something here, else it will return the list view.builder. So I'll just proceed to call the empty widget. Let me set it inside a sized box with a width of 300 and call the empty widget. Define the image as null. You don't need an image here. The package image is just defining one of the icons that it holds. I'll just take the first one and give it the title. We need the title of the app, which is in our const. And then we'll define a subtitle and give it the text no parking area available yet. And then we'll define the text style of the title. Font size 18, colors.black, font weight dot 500. Also define the sub. Set it as 14. Give it the color black. Let's remove that. Click on save. Let me refresh this. We see if we'll get any information from the parking areas. If there's nothing, we should see an empty widget. If there's information, we should be able to see our list view. Then now we'll start populating the correct information. So we have Jane. Is it Jane Doe or Jane? Let's see. Jane Doe. Okay. The schema must be one of the following: public, GraphQL public. So the reason why we're getting the error that we're getting is because there are a few settings that we're supposed to perform on our custom schema, which is parking schema. So Supabase provides a very beautiful documentation for that. So we need to perform two settings. We need to go to API settings and add our custom schema to the exposed schemas. So we head over to project settings, click on API, and then in our API settings, when you go down, there's a section that says exposed schemas. We need to add our own schema, which is parking. Great, and then we click on save. The next thing that Supabase tells us is we need to run the following SQL, and then we'll substitute wherever there is a text my schema, we substitute it to the name of our custom schema. So I'll just proceed to copy this, and then I'll head over to the SQL editor in a new as a new query. Then I'll come here and replace wherever there's my schema, I replace it with parking. So it grants permission and privileges of all these tables in the schema parking to these specific roles that you can see here. And one of them is our own unknown role. So let's just run this. And it's successful. So now that we've done those two settings, let's go back to our project. and try and run this code again. Or before that, there's a third part that we need to do, which is in our Dart project, we need to add this specific part of code. So I'll just proceed to copy this, or let's just write it ourselves. So in main.dart, we'll proceed to add another setting here, PostgreSQL options. And then we're going to define our schema, give it the name parking. I have a feeling this will cause an error again, because we're now specifying it to only parking. So any table that's in the public schema might cause an error. So before we paste this, let's see first if with the two settings our code will work. As you can see, it has refreshed. Let me just refresh it again. We see. So I'll just sign in. Jane Doe. And our error has gone. Awesome. So we are displaying. Let's see. Let's go back to our code and see this. Home.dart. We set the item count as 5, but now we need to set it to whatever is being returned by this method, this specific function. So let's just set now everything here so it displays the exact parking information of the parking areas that are in the parking area table. So we'll start with the item count and just say parking areas dot length. And then we'll proceed to now define the name. So we'll have parking areas index name, remove the const. Great. Now we get to see the exact information. Let me do the rest. So there is a location text. So we'll just say parking areas index and those are the two main information that we're displaying on the parking area. The rest of the information will be displayed in the parking area screen. So that's great. We're reading from our database. Next thing we'll do is now work on tap. So when you click on tap, it directs us to the parking area. But now we want to pass the information of every specific parking area to the parking area screen. So to do that, we'll need to create a file. I'll just minimize this. I'll define a simple file called in the lib folder called arguments. That will hold our arguments. So I'll just give it the class name parking arguments. Then it will have a type of map string dynamic. Give it the name parking area. Then define the constructor parking arguments required this dot parking area. Great. Now that we have that, we can close this. We'll get to use it. So I'll head over to the parking area dot and define a route name. So I'll name it static const route name is equals to area. Then I head over to main.dart and redefine the route parking area. So I'll just define it as parking area dot route name. Great. Then back to the parking area. I want to define a variable that will hold the arguments that will be passed in this class. So we'll use a model route dot of context settings arguments as parking arguments, the class that we defined. Great. Now back to our home screen. I'll remove this navigation and update it. So we'll say navigator, the push named, and then for our route name, say parking area dot route name. Sorry, parking area route name, and then we're going to define the arguments. So it will be parking arguments. And we'll pass in parking areas, the specific index. Close that. So now let's refresh this. But before we refresh, now that it's here, let's just update some of the information so that we see the changes right away. Parking area. So I'll start by, so we have a up bar. The up bar is okay. And then we'll proceed to downtown plaza. We need to specify this. I remove the const and just say args. Parking area name. And then next thing will be the price. We'll say, let's see. Let me see if I can do this right. So to get the parking fee, we'll call the column parking fee. We can always counter check from the table. And then I need to add a $sign here. I want to do it right. So there's a $. First comes in form of per hour. Then I need to add a $sign here. This code will help me with that. Yes, it should look something like that. Let me add const, and then next thing we need is description. So this will be args.parking area, and then we specify the key, which will be location text. And then we have the number of slots. We'll get to do that part. There's some logic that's involved. And then for rating, currently we're showing it as 4.0. So I'll just change this. Let me remove the const dot parking area rating to string because it comes in form of an integer. And what else? We have a carousel, which is carousel slider, list of images. We're not handling that. Then there's an option to share, which is just a button. Then we have the save, which is another logic that we'll add. Then we have description. Let's just change this. Need to make sure that the name of the key is the same as the column name. Description. Okay, then we have amenities, which involves a list builder. So for the item count, we already have a column for this. So let's say args parking area. And then we specify. Remember, we set the data type as an array. So in that, it will take it as a list amenities dot length. And then now that we have that, I'll come here and define args dot parking area amenities. There must be a const somewhere. Here it is. And then you specify the index. Then we have it. So it should be able to display a column of a list of amenities in a column. And then we have now the bottom navigation that navigates the parking details. So let's try and refresh this because we've made some changes on main.dart and see how that looks. So we have Jane Doe, gmail.com. Then we have our different parking areas. If I click on this now, you can see it's picking the exact information for a specific parking area. So for this parking area, the parking fee is $10 per hour. We're yet to change this, but you can see the rating is 4.5 and we can read the descriptions here, but our amenities are displayed wrongly. So let's sort that out. But let's just try and check on another So as you can see, informations are being picked based on the specific parking area. Let's work on how many it is. Parking schema, parking area. Something wrong with our, let me see. Let me check the schema. So we have amenities, text. Oh man, we didn't define as array. That's the reason why. Sorry about that. I think we had two columns that required to be. Oh, so we set the location image as array, but we didn't set this. So that's the reason why, guys. So let's just refresh that again. Let me just refresh it. In case it refuses, I'll just create a new, because I found a situation where I tried to update a column. Let me just try again before changing anything. Define as array, same. It should be correct now. Let me just refresh. Great. Let me just insert the right amenity name. So we had parking area, argument, parking area, amenities. Click on save. Okay. Index, sorry. There we have it. So let me see. There has to be something. Great. Elevators. Don't start with elevators. Bus station. Okay. It's recording the right thing. So now we're done with this part, but we're not done yet. We have the search feature. Let's work on the search feature so that when we get to this part, we are done at least with this screen. So I'll head over back to home. And the search feature is here, search parking area. So we want to handle whenever a user changes anything or updates anything. And then we also update that list of parking area based on the results that come back from Supabase. So I'll have two variables here. One will be to validate in the point where we are searching. If we are searching, it should be true. If you're not searching, it should be set to false. And then this one will hold the result that will come back, which will always come in form of a type list. Search list. So we have those two. So on change, I'll do a check. So what I want to do is if the value dot is empty, we're not searching anything, so the search should be false. Else, the search is true. Make sure that is updated. Okay, then the next thing we need to do is update the list, get the list that's coming based on whatever the search word that the user passes. So to do that, we need to call a specific method from the parking repository. And I think we have one of, let's search parking area. We have it here. So let's work on the logic for this part. So as usual, we do a try catch. I'll just pick my catch over here. Then inside we'll set a sync. Then inside here we do an await, call a Supabase client. And then we want to access the parking area table. So we'll say .schema parking, and then from parking area, and we want to do a select, and then we want to do a text search or full text search. So to access full text search in Supabase, you call the method text search, specify the column we're searching using the parking area name, and then we pass in the word. And since it will come back in form of a type list, you just need to return it. And that's that. So let me call this, head over to the home screen and call our repository class and call that. And then we need to pass in the context and the search word. Is there anything else? Need to perform an await. Great. So it will set the information based on whatever the user searches. It will set this variable with the results. But now how can we access this? How can we populate or present the results that come from here? So that's the next part. So what I'll do is use the variable, the boolean variable that we set, and state that if it's a search, if we're actually searching something, I want to proceed and do something here, else let's just display all the results, which is the whatever we have here. Okay, so because the design will be the same, I'll just copy the whole container. You'll get to see what I mean. So this is the one that we have copied, and then we don't need a future builder here. We're just passing in the future builder. Let me just remove this future builder. Then another thing is now we'll want to display an empty, or say no search found if the search list is empty. If it's empty, we say no search found, else instead of the parking areas, we'll use the search list, and then we define using the search list. Let me just copy this, paste it there. We have another one, paste it there. I think we have another one. Oh, move that. So let's see if our search works. Sign in. Let's search for city. There we have it. If I clear, it returns all the list of all parking areas. If I decide to search for suburban, there it is. And if I click on the specific parking area, it provides the right information. Great. So we can see the full text search in Supabase is quite fast. Let's work on this clear button. So when you click on that, we want first to clear the controller. Next, we want to set the search to false so that you get to see the whole list of parking areas, and then we just all set state. So let's try that. So if I decide to search for downtown, there we have it. If I click on that, great. So we're done with this screen. Now let's work on the parking area. So for the parking area, we'll start with the two things that we need to work on. Displaying the right number of slots that are available for this parking area, and also like allowing the user to save this parking area as a favorite. So let's do those two things and we should be done on this part. So back to our code. Now we're going to head over to parking area, correct. This is a place where we're saying 5 slots available. This is a place, okay. So we're going to call in our parking repository class, I think we have function called get available slots. So I'll just clear this. We do our usual try, and then our catch. We'll just pick this, set this to async, and call a Supabase client. So we're going to call wait Supabase client. Sorry, Supabase. That's the name of our Supabase client, and then we're going to call the parking slot table, but it's in the parking schema. So let's define the schema, and then we say from specify our table, which is parking slot. This will be a little bit intense, but I'll go slowly. So we're going to do a select, and we're selecting the ID of the parking slot, and we're also selecting something else. So so what we need to us to get available slots, let me just proceed to, I think when we look at the table, that's when we get to understand. Okay, so in the parking, for us to get info number of parking slots in a specific parking areas, you can see in our table we don't have a parking area column. But for us to get the information, the parking, where this parking specific parking slot is in terms of in the which parking area, we'll need information about the parking lot. And it's through that parking lot we'll get information about the parking area. As you can see, we're able to store the ID. So the beautiful thing about such type of a query, we'll get to learn about something called inner join. So we're going to create an inner join between the parking slot and the parking lot so that you can get information about the parking area. I hope that makes sense. So this is how we're going to do it. Back to our code. So we have we're accessing the parking slot. We're going to create an inner join between the parking slot and the parking lot, and that's possible because we already have a column that references. We have a column in the parking lot that references the parking lot table. So to do that, we just call the parking lot, and then we'll proceed to call the word inner, and then we just want to pick all the information in that specific let me just remove this, sorry, should be around this whole part. So we want to get all the information about this parking lot. So this is possible because of Supabase. So what Supabase is going to do, because it knows when I call parking lot, I'm referencing the column parking lot ID in the parking slot, it will return for me all the information about this specific parking lot ID. Okay, and then now once I have that, I can be able to do a check, which is, we said where clause in Supabase is the EQ method. So we're going to do a check. Now that it's returning all the information in the parking lot table based on the parking lot ID in the parking slot table, we'll just come here and say we want the column that we're looking for is parking lot dot parking area ID. This one, if you remember, since we're getting all the information about the parking lot based on, so we have the parking slot. The parking slot table holds the parking lot ID column, which references to the parking lot table. And now because of that parking lot ID, we're able to get all the information about that specific parking lot ID, which includes the parking area ID, which is stored in the parking lot table. So now, because we can access that and we're returning all, we're able to get it from here thanks to this whole column. We're able to get it. So we'll just call the parking lot table, the result that's coming in, and it comes with a column of that space. It comes with a column that is found in the parking lot table, which is a parking area ID, and we want to pass it the value parking area ID. I hope it makes sense. So we want to do two checks. We want to check where the parking area ID is equals to whatever the user, whichever parking area we are in right now, whenever we are going through the app. And then we also want to do another check where, now we're doing a check in the parking slot table. So we'll do another check that says availability is true. Okay, and then we set as count because we want to get the number. That's all we need. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. This is a way of performing inner join, or joining two tables, multiple tables together to get specific information. Because as you can see in our database schema, we really abstracted our tables in a way that there's a relationship among each other, and there's no repetition of data in one table of a table in another table, thanks to the use of referential integrity. So you find that with this kind of query, when we are joining two tables, the parking lot and the parking slot, because the parking lot is the one that has information about the parking area, and whatever we have on our app is the parking area ID. So that's why we need it. And through that parking area ID, we're able to get the list. And also, we not only do we want that, we also want to make sure that the availability is true, because we want to display to the user. We want to display to the user the list of available. You can see 5 slots available. So we need to get the list that is available. So that means the availability column, let me show that. The availability column should be true. You can see that. So let's try and run this and see if we are on the right track. So now that we have our function, let me just copy this. We'll need it in the parking area. And what we're going to do is we're going to set a future builder for this so that it updates whenever there's any change that has been made. So I'll set it over here. Future builder. The future will be parking repository dot get available. Slots, and our parking area ID will be UGS parking area, and then we pick the column ID. Then we'll just come here and create our builder and return our text here, and then we'll just, let me remove set const. Then because we are returning, we haven't returned anything yet. Great. So we're supposed to return like a type of int. Let's just do that. Just define that and then just return data dot count. That's how we'll get the exact info. So back to our parking area, just come here and define int available slots is equals to snapshot.data. If nothing is returned, we'll just set it to 0. It's important to perform null safety. And then we'll just call our available slots here and remove toString, and let's just replace it interpolation const save. So let's see. Let me just space this out. Okay, let's see our app. Let me go back. Let me select Suburban. Why does it keep saying 5, 7? Oh, 1 slot, 4 slots, 5 slots. Great, so it's working. It's actually populating. I thought it was constant, but it's not. Great. So we have sorted one of the functionalities. The second one is save as favorite. So we'll just head over to this part. This is the part that we need. And we head over to our parking repository. We have the section, a method that says save as favorite. We just set our try and catch. Just proceed to copy this. Set this to async. Call our Supabase client. Our favorite table, we're interacting with the favorite table, which is in our public schema. So we just head over, proceed to just call the from method, define our variable, the name of our table, favorite. So we're going to use the method appsat that does that. And then we'll just define the user ID. Remember, our user ID, we get it from our provider, user ID. And then we define the parking area. Remember, the key has to be equivalent to the column name. So we'll just pass in the parking area, which will pass here. And then we just proceed to do a select, because we just want to do a simple check. So I'll just assign this to a variable. And then we do a check if the data is not empty. Make sure that the context is mounted. We can do a show dialog. And return an alert dialog. Just close this. Inside our alert dialog, we'll have an icon. Let's give it a color. And size it. Then we're going to have content. Text that says added to your favorites. Let's style it. Font weight. And then let's align it. And then let's set the actions. We'll just have one button or an icon button that will just do a navigator.pop. This is just for user experience. Icon, icons.thumbs up. And then we set the color. The colors are set in the constants.dot. So there we have it. So if there's data, it should do that. And we'll be able to check thanks to the select. So whenever you do an upsert or an insert, when you do a dot select, should return the record that you have actually inserted. So let's use our save as favorite method function. Inside here, all I have to do is set this as a sync and then do an await packing repository to save as favorite. Let's define the ID of the packing area using the arguments packing area. Call the key as the column ID and we close it at that. So let's try and save it and see. So I want to save, let's go to beachside parking slot and I want to save this as a favorite. Add it to your favorites. Let's check our favorites table if we can see it. So we head over to the public schema. Check on favorites. And there we have it. So we have saved, this user ID has saved parking area of type ID 5, which we can always check as a favorite. Let's just go to parking area ID 5 and see if it's beachside. 5 beachside, correct. So we are sorted on that part. So I can safely say that we are done with this parking area screen. And we need to proceed to the next step, which is the parking details. So I'll just close this. You can also close login, sign up. Great. So we head over to parking details. And in our parking details, we still need, whenever we are saving, we'll still need the information about that parking area, mainly the parking area ID. So let's just send up an object of the specific information of the specific parking area that we are in as a props to the parking details table. So how we'll do that is, first I'll just change the main.dart root. So parking details, it's here. And just say parking details. How can I do that before I need something like, I need to define the root name like this one in the parking details. Let me just copy and paste and just say details. Then I can head over back to the and just say root name. Let's see why we have an error. No, sorry. And then the next thing will be in the parking area, there's a way we're defining to get how we define to get the arguments. I'll just do the same here instead of repeating myself. So I'll just add it here and then we just import the parking arguments table class, sorry. And then I'll just refresh this because we're making so many changes here. So in the parking area, the bottom here, what we do is just call it like this, but we have changed the root, so we'll just need to define that by saying parking details root, and then we need to set the arguments, parking arguments, and then we just get args.parking area and head over with it to the other side. So parking details, so we have that. All I have to do, I just refreshed because I have changed the root from the main dot. We have that. Click on proceed. Now let's work on this part. All we are asking the user is to add the duration, and we get to ask them to choose vehicle. So we need to go and get the list of vehicles that the user has, and if they don't, they should be able to add a new one. Okay, so those are like 1, 2, 3 functionalities that we need to implement in one screen. And the first one will be, let's do this section for choose your vehicle. Let's go and get the vehicles. And in this case, of course, the user should have at least one vehicle, if you remember the sign up process. So this is just information that I set as constant. Let's work on this part. So we'll head over to parking repository. We had a method that said get my vehicle. Here we have it. I'll just minimize this later. Back to our logic, and then we just do our usual try, pick our catch. Great. Set it as a sync. So we'll call our Supabase client, and we'll get we're interacting with the vehicle table, which is in our public schema vehicle, and then we do a select, and then we need to do a where clause. So what we're going to do, we call the eq method, define our column. Our column is user ID because we're getting vehicles of a specific user based on the user ID. We'll get our ID from the provider, and we are done. And then we'll just do a return straight away because we're not doing any manipulation over here. Now let's go back to our parking details, and in this part I'll just use a future builder for this. Future builder, parking repository, get my vehicles, then inside here we return our column. Great, so we're inside here. So let's get whatever we are receiving. So it will be of type list. Always know that what the result that Supabase returns is of type list, map, string dynamic. Wow. Sorry. Map, string, dynamic, I'll call response is equals to snapshot dot data, and then make sure you handle your null safety like that. So I want to say if the response dot is empty, we don't expect it. The user should have at least one vehicle, but let's just take a case scenario where it's empty. Like for some reason, this user went through the sign up and still wasn't able to have a vehicle saved, and they went through the whole sign up process. Let's just say, just in case, we'll just do a return const. Since we have nothing to display to them, we'll just create a simple size box dot shrink just to show nothing. So that means the only thing that they'll get to see is add a new vehicle. Okay, and then if there is data, that's when now we come and work on it here. We'll set the dropdown dot value dot is equals to response dot first. We're just defining it, and then let's see. Oh, the data type. Okay, we'll have to redefine the data type here. Instead of string, we'll have map string dynamic. So of course we'll have some errors down here. We'll just sort them one by one. Next thing is choose your vehicle. On the drop down, we'll just define here this part, map string dynamic, and then we do the same here, map string dynamic. On the items part, we'll just call the response, and then the value will be the value, then the text will be value, and then it will return a key called, the key will be, it will return all the columns of the vehicle table, but what we want to display is a car number. So for our value here, we need to update it as well, map string dynamic. There we have it. Same for here, map string dynamic. There we have it. So let's just save on that and see if we get, there we have it. So this user should have at least one 4xp9. Let's just counter check. 4xp9 public vehicle 4xp9. Great. So we're doing well. Back to our code. So we're able to select from whatever is being returned from Supabase. Now there's another part called add new vehicle. Let's try and add a new vehicle for this user. They may be driving with a different vehicle from the one that they signed up with. So let's work on this part. So we'll need to reference or reach out to the profile or the profile sign up, which we had touched on. It was the third step of the sign up process. We're going to manipulate it a little bit so that you can reuse the same form instead of creating a new one. So there are a few changes I will make. So there's a variable I'm going to add that just checks if the user is signed in or not. I could use the user ID as well, but let's just leave the user ID as is. I'm going to head over to the provider and define a different variable. Let's give it a type of bool, signed in. There are many ways to do this process, but let's just go through this one. If you have any other ideas, please share. Is equals to, so that's the getter. Then we create a setup method. So there we have it. So I want in the package repository at the point of signing user, other than setting the user ID, I also want to define that variable in the provider. So I'll just say Supabase provider set signed in status as true. And then at the point of logout, that's when we set it as false. So now that we have that, initially it's false. If we sign in, it will be set to true, and then when we're working on the logout, we'll set it as false. So the reason we need that, so this part will just be as is, it will direct us to the sign up. But now, let me just navigate to the sign up. Actually, no. Yes, let's just proceed to the sign up. So when I click on add new vehicle, it takes us here. This is how the form looked like when we are working on the third step of the sign up process. But we don't need the name and the phone number. So we want to manipulate this form a little bit so that it just shows the car information, where the user can just insert or add a new car. That's all we're doing. So I'll head over to that specific profile sign up, and I'm just going to manipulate it a little bit. So we have profile details. Here it says set up your user and car profile. I want to change this information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a column that holds two types of text widgets. So we have this, and we have another one that says set up your car profile. And now I want to add visibility here. Wrap with visibility. Same for this one. Right now it will show both of them. But now I want, since we already signed in, we're supposed to see set up your car profile. But if we were signed out, it should be saying set up your user and car profile. So we want to manage that using the variable that we have set in our provider. Invalid const. Okay. And then this other one will be visible. Supabase provider that signed. So if one is false, the other means not false, which is true. This is what means, it represents the word not. So let's just do const and see how that looks. So you see it says set up your user and car profile. Let's refresh. Remember, we signed in, but we have added new logic in the sign in user method. So we have to sign in again so that the data can be updated, because right now the signed in variable says false because this specific logic that we have just added has not been executed. So I'll just do that. Sign in. janedoe@gmail.com. Click on a specific, proceed, add new vehicle, set up your car profile, correct. Now it's working. Back to the class. Let's do another function, this part. First, since it's the name, we need to remove the name and the phone number. Let me just wrap them up in one widget, which is a column. Good. And then I'm going to wrap this into a visibility. Wrap with widget, visibility. No, let's see. Just did that. That was wrong. That was wrong. So let me just do this again. So we're wrapping this into a column. Great. And then we're wrapping this into visibility. Why does it do that? Okay. Column. Okay, it's fine. And then visibility and column. So let's set the visible attribute. Supabase provider dot signed in. So we're not seeing the name and the phone number correct. So that's how it's supposed to look. Now we can proceed. We'll just head over to the logic part where we had already worked on it. It already has some logic here, but this is at the third step of sign up. So you need to do that check again. So if Supabase provider dot signed in, that's when we call this method, this specific function. Else we now proceed to call another method called add car profile in our repository class. Add car profile, we should have it here. And if you remember, we added the logic. Awesome. So we just need to call it. Great. So let's do an await packing repository dot add car profile. So for car profile, we'll have the car model. Let me minimize this so you get to see model controller dot text. Then we have the car number dot text, and then we have the drop down value, and we close it as that. So the reason why we're doing this is so that we're able to add another new vehicle and see if we can populate the new list of vehicles that the user has. So let's try that. I'll just our app bar also has to change. Let me see. Let's see. So I'll just using the same variable Supabase provider that's signed in. Now else. Okay, let's test this. We'll just proceed to enter a car model. Just enter any car number, select a color, and then click on next. So the navigation is wrong. Let me check. But let's first check if the vehicle has been added. I'll just refresh, and there we have it. Our Toyota has been added, and it's for the user ID 4. So if we head over to login, which it shouldn't direct us to login, but I'm going to sort that in a few. If we proceed to login, in our dropdown, we should see our 2 vehicles. So if I click on this, as you can see, it's populating our 2 vehicles, which is good. Let me check on the next button. Add car profile. So what does it do? Directs to, okay, we need to do a condition, add some conditions here. So inside here, I'll just say if Supabase provider that's signed in, we just do a navigator.pop, else. That means if he or she is not signed in, it'll direct them to the login form. So I think we're okay with that. We can either test it, or we'll get to pass through this process again. So let's just continue. So now we're able to add a new vehicle. The next thing we want to do now is to be able to book our parking. So in the proceed section, let's proceed. So in this part, we have set the total fee as default 20. We need it to calculate based on whatever the user enters. So if the user enters, entry time is 10:16 and they put in 3 hours, it should be able to calculate the right exit time. And based on the duration of hours and the parking fee of that specific parking area, it should be able to calculate the correct total parking fee. So we're going to update that on, just lost it again here. So all I need to do is convert the duration that the user has set to double. So let's say duration controller.txt text, and then I just multiply it with the parking fee. Parking fee. There we have it. So let's try and test this. So if I want to a duration of 2 hours, let's first go back. Our parking fee here, let me use a different parking area like city center, which is 12. Proceed. If I set it to 2, so the total parking fee will be 24, which is correct because the parking fee per hour is 2 hours. So 12 times 2 is 24. Great. Now let's work on the logic for proceed. So we'll just head over to, this is the part that we need to add logic on. And the method that we're going to use is set parking, or book. Should be one of those, book parking. Let me see. From our adapter, we must have something like that. Save parking, not save a parking. We're not going to save the booking at this point because we still need to, when we're saving the booking, we need to be able to know the specific parking slot that one has selected. So we're just going to store the information from here in our provider, and set it on a state save it on a state, and then we'll proceed to pick it and now book the parking at the end of the process, which is the next screen. So instead of All I need to do is to save the information that the user has set from the duration hours and also the parking area information. I'll just head over to the provider and create that. So I'm going to store an object containing the parking information so far to where the user has reached, which is the process where they're setting the number of hours. But we need more information so that we can save the booking, which is a parking lot, and the parking slot, which is in the next screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to design a simple model for simplicity. Create a new folder, call it model, and give it a name of a file. New folder, models, new file, parking model dot. I'll define the name of the class as parking. So the object will contain the current date. So we'll have final string parking date. We'll have the entry time. We'll have the duration in hours. We'll have exit time. The parking area information, which is the name, the description, the amenities, and all that. We'll also hold the user ID. The vehicle ID, and we'll set it as an option because we're going to save this without the parking slot ID. But once we get to the next screen, we'll now update it and then push it to Supabase. So let's define the constructor. Required parking date, required entry time, required duration, required exit, required parking area, required user ID, required vehicle ID, and then we'll add this but not as a requirement. We don't need that. So there is our model of parking. So now that we have that, let's define it here, and then we'll save its state once we update it from the parking details. So I'll define a variable of type parking, give it the name parking. Then set getter. Let's define the setter method. That the argument will be of type parking. That will hold the parking details so far. And then we assign it to this variable and proceed to call the notify listener method. Then we have it now back to our parking details. We'll proceed to call Supabase, the provider, our provider that is, and call the setter parking. And then we're going to design the parking model. So for the parking date, we'll call the formatted date. For entry time, we'll have entry time. For duration, we just enter this. We'll need to pass it of type int duration controller.text. For exit time, there we have it. For parking area, we'll just pass it as args.parking area. Then for the user ID, we'll get it from, we don't even need to set this, but let's just proceed. Supabase provider user ID, and then we have the vehicle ID based on whatever the user has selected. Down value ID, and then we have just make sure it's selected. The value must contain a value, and then lastly it will currently set as null. There we have it. And then now once we're done, we're going to navigate to this specific next screen, which is a parking lot, which is the final part. But now in the parking lot, we need to pass it the parking area information. So I'll go to main.dat. Let's first go to parking lot. Define a route. Lot. Let's give it that name. Then we go to our main.dat and update our route. Parking lot. Route name. And then I'll just come. We've already defined this before, so I don't need to type it all over again. I'll just copy this. Head over to parking lot and paste it. And then import our respective class and save that. So now let me just refresh it because we have changed the route. jendo@gmail.com. So I'll check on Suburban. Set to first. Let me add a new one. So we'll have click on next. So we're able to see my Tesla set to 3 hours, and we click on proceed. So there's an error. Let me see. In our parking details, we're not passing the arguments that we are setting that to be expected, which is this part. Sorry. So I'll just proceed and do that. So parking lot dot route name, arguments, parking arguments, and then we click on save. Gendo, proceed, 3 hours 45, proceed. So we are here, and this is the final part. Great. So it's not displaying the correct information because if you remember, we have picked the parking area that has a name airport. So now let's update that. I'll just close the rest of the files. We stick with that. So we have parking lot. Let's proceed to clear this and remove that. Parking area name const. Great. And then we have the next one will be parking area location text. So now the next thing we need to do is display the correct floors for this parking lot. Okay, so let's do that. Choosing your parking slot. So in this list view, we need to manipulate it based on the number of floors for this parking lot that are stored in Supabase. So I'll just come here and use the future builder. But first, let's define the function in parking repository class, and the name should be called get floors, something like get floors by parking lot. I'll do a try. Then we handle the catch. And I set this to async. Then we proceed to define our variable where we await for this to call the Supabase client. And we're going to get this information from the parking lot. But we're going to also interacting with two tables, parking lot and parking floor, to get information using the parking area ID. So it's the concept of inner join that we did the other time. So I'll define the parking slot is in the parking schema. So I'll need to define the schema first, parking, and then from parking lot, then I'm going to define what am I selecting the ID, and in that parking lot we have the parking floor ID, but we're going to use that parking floor to get the parking floors for a specific parking lot. So I'm just going to call the parking floor table and do an inner join and get all the information. That means the name, which is the main thing in that table. But now we're going to do a check where the column parking area ID is equals to the parking area ID, that is the argument. So there we have it. So let me just repeat myself. So we are using the parking lot table to get information about the parking floors. So already the parking lot has an ID of type, has a column called parking floor. Let's just go back to the database and see that. So if you see the parking lot, it has a column called parking floor ID, but I need to return all the information about this ID called 3. So that's why I'm doing an inner and getting all. So that's how you do it in Supabase, where I just wanted to pick the ID of this parking lot and also the parking floor ID, but this parking floor ID only consists of the ID, and ID is not, it's not information that I actually need to display to the user. I need now the information about this specific ID. So that's why we're doing that. So if you go back to our code, if I end up picking the column parking floor ID, it will return for me those integers, but I have no use with the integers, displaying integers into the app. The user won't understand what 3 is. So that's why you need to specify this and set as all. So it will return all the information about that parking floor, and then you get to decide what you want to display, and in our case, it's the name. Okay, and then this is just our where clause, where we want only the parking floors that where the parking area ID is equals to the specific parking area that we are in. So that's all. Then we just proceed to return it. Since we're not manipulating any data here, I'll just return it straight and save. So now let's call this get floors by parking lot. So I'll use a future builder. And then I'm just going to call the method repository parking get floors by parking lot. Parking area, specify ID. Then for our builder, do a return of this. It will be a list view with a scroll direction of axis dot horizontal. Let me add a semicolon, just close this, and then let's work on this part. So I'll just define a variable of type list, snapshot.data. Then we handle null safety. If it returns null, it should return an empty list. And then we do our check if response that is empty. We come here and return our empty widget 300. I'll type this quite fast, empty widget. So that's how we're going to have it. So if, let me just set a semicolon. If the response is empty, it will return that, else to return the list view. So for the list view, we'll come here and so we have int index. So item count, let's just start with item count, will be response.length. Then if we come upwards, can define the instead of ground, we'll now have response index. It will come with the key packing flow, and that will also have a key. It will be, the value will be an object, so we'll need to also get a key inside that object called name. I'll just remove this. Let's see how that looks. There we have it. So for this specific lot, there's only ground floor. Let me see if that's valid. Let me try and select another one, like which side, proceed to proceed. Okay, awesome. So this one has 2 floors, a basement and a first floor. So that's awesome. So now what we want is to be able to manipulate this too. If I click on basement, I should just see the slots in the basement, and for first floor, I should see the slots in the first floor. So we proceed here. But you see now, in terms of selecting, I want to change something. Let me first see if it's possible. So what we want is when the user clicks on basement, we get the information about the slots of that specific floor. So we're going to define our method. There's a method that gets that, and it's called get slots by packing floor. So I'll just pick that, do a try, and then let me call this great. Set this to async. Call our Supabase client. And we are going to get this information from the packing slot table. So I'm just going to define the schema first. Packing, then from packing slot, we want to select the ID, the name, the packing, the availability, and the information about the packing lot. It's another inner join. And from that, we're going to do a where clause that has an and. So because now we have the information about the packing lot, we want to use that information, use the equal method and packing lot and get the packing floor ID, okay, that is equal to this packing floor, the one that the user will have selected. And we also need to check the column where the packing lot, packing area ID is equals to the specific packing area that we are in. And then we just want to order it correctly. So we order the column ID in the packing slot and set it to ascending. So much to pick. It's because of how we designed our database, which is correct. You get to play around with SQL query, but Supabase, because they have abstracted that part for us, we're just calling methods in this case. So if I can just go through it again, we're selecting from the packing slot the ID, the name, the availability, and also the packing lot. But we don't need just the packing lot ID. We need all the information about that specific packing lot ID. And once we get it, we now use the parking floor ID from that parking lot and check where that parking floor ID is equals to whichever parking floor ID we have as argument in our function, and where the parking area ID in this parking lot object information is equal to the parking area ID that we're passing as an argument. And then all we've done is just ordered our rows into ascending. Now we can return this. So back to our parking lot. So our slots are being displayed by a different widget, which is a grid view, which is okay. So what I'll do is just define a very separate variable that will hold our slots that we'll receive from Supabase. So I'll just say list map string dynamic slots is equals to this, and then we head over down here. This part. And define our slots. Slots is equals to await parking repository. Let's just set this to async repository dot get slots by parking floor. So we'll need to pass in the parking floor ID, which is response index parking floor ID. And then our parking area ID will be parking area ID. Now we have it. Then we can do a set state. Click on save. So let's try and click and see. Okay, we haven't manipulated the grid view. Now let's work on the grid view. So for the grid view, how will we manage this? We can just say if slots dot is empty, slots dot is empty. I'll just use there's already have an empty widget here. I can just use it. And define it here. Else we display the grid view. Refactor, wrap with widget. So in our grid view, I'll just on the item count, item count will be based on the list slots dot length. And then for our card, what we need to display is the text. So I'll just remove this and call slots So this slot is this where we are setting, we had index on the other one. So we just want to pick base by index and then we pick the name. And then lastly, I think we should check how that looks first. So right now it says no floors available yet. Let's try and click on one. No, it shouldn't say no floors available yet. It should say click, select your floor. So let's select our floor, like basement. So we have an error. Okay, null is not a subtype of list. Let's see. Let me manage this. So let's have a look at the error that we're getting. I think it's something to do with our query, correct? So we need to add a comma between ID and name. So let's try again and see. Ground floor, there we have it. First floor, those are the specific slots. But now we want to know which ones are available and which ones are not. So let's go back to parking lot and we manage that. This is in the grid view. So we'll do it all here. So we'll do a check. Slots, specific slot. And check the key availability. Close that. If it's true, it should display this card, which will have an on top. Let me just check where is. Wait, else we'll have the same card. We'll also have a card here. We'll just define the color as white, and then we'll just display a child that has a center widget. And holds a child of an image.asset app icon. And then for this, for the coloring, we'll just update it later. Let's first see if it's able to differentiate. It has. So the ones that have the icon, they're not available. So they're not even clickable. But the ones that have are the ones that have the names are the ones that are clickable. But the ones that have the app icon are not clickable. Great. That's how it should be. And then that means they're not available. So I'll just try and check if I need to save whatever has been selected. Let's see if I'll be able to do whatever I did before, where I had a list color for slots. Let's just see if it will work out from here. And then let's see, one tap. The grid view is not inside a feature builder, so I think it should work. So slot color is equals to, let's regenerate the list with the length of slots.length. Then we'll have an index colors.white. Initially they should be so. Now I think I'll just leave the coloring out. I'll update it later on. That's just for aesthetics. So let's just make sure that we're able to hold whatever the user selects. But now the issue is that even if the user selects, we need that effect of the user has selected. So let me just finish whatever I was trying to do here. Okay, so I think I should regenerate that here. Slot colors. Slot color is equals to list or generate. And then slots.length. Define that colors.white. So all of them will be so. Okay, and then now when I come here to the specific card, let me try and do a set state. Already we have defined the list, so we'll need to pick it from the slot color of index slot. And then on the user tabs, we set a variable. I think I'll give it map string dynamic. Map string dynamic selected color. And define selected color as slots of index slot, and then define the color that has been selected of index slot as brand color. the valid value. So, okay, we'll get to see that. Let me just refresh this. Click on ground floor. Let's click on G4. Exactly, that's what I want. Now it's not resetting, man. Okay, yeah, so I need to come here and just copy whatever is here. On click, it should reset fast and set the selected one. Okay, let's try that again. So if I click on this, click on that, great. That's awesome. Now we're almost done. So now we're in the bottom part where it says select parking slot. So instead of saying just that, we want to do a check. I think I'll do it inside the text widget. Selected slot dot is empty. Selected slot. How did I set it? This is supposed to be selected slot, not color. So I need to change this here. And then change it here. If it's empty, it should say that, else it should say park slot selected slot. Pick the key name. Exactly. So you can see at the bottom it picks. So park slot G6. We click on fast flow, park slot IE. Awesome. So now, other than that, we now have to work on the onPressed function. So for the onPressed function, we'll just do first. Let me just do a check. So let's do our check where we check if the selected slot is empty. That means the user hasn't selected any parking slot. If it's empty, we set the button to null, else proceed to add our logic here, and we'll need a specific function in the parking repository called save parking details, which will now save the whole parking detail information until the point where we are, the screen that we are in. There's no logic here, as you can see, so let's work on that. So we'll add a try. Then a catch, set this to async, and then we'll define a variable called data, call our Supabase client, define our schema, define our table, parking detail, and then we'll proceed to insert. So let's define our values. So our first column will be parking 8. We'll do this quite fast. Make sure the column name is the same as what's in the table. Now that we have that, let's call the select method so that we can get the new record that has been inserted, because we'll need to do a small check here where we'll say data is not empty. We'll proceed to call a specific function called update slot availability. So what it will do is, the moment the user selects a specific parking slot, in our case, which is IE, once we book it, we need to make sure that the availability of this parking slot is now false. It's no longer available for the next user. So that's what that function will do. It will be quite small, so just proceed to go there. And all we have to do is set a sync and then call our Supabase client, define our schema, which is parking, define our table, which is parking slot, and then we need to define, we're doing an update, so we'll define our values here. The column that we are updating is availability, and we're going to set it as false, where using the EQ method, we define the column ID where the ID is equals to the parking slot ID that has been passed as a parameter. So that's all it's going to do. Back to our parking lot screen. Now let's add our logic. So for the file we have come, if you remember, we had stored some information about the parking details that the user has set so far in state. So we're just going to go and pick it from the provider. So we're going to define a variable of type parking. And then we just go and head over to the Supabase provider class and get our object. Now that we have it, let me just import this. Remember, there's a variable that we did not set, which is a slot, parking slot. So now we're able to set it because the user has selected something, and we'll find it in the selected slot. But what we want to store is the ID in that object. Great. Now we have that. So now let's proceed to call, let me set this to async, our function from the parking repository class, save parking details. Then we get to add all this. So starting with the parking date, we'll get it from our parking model object, parking date. Then we have parking entry time. Then we have parking duration. Then we have parking exit time. Then we have parking area, parking vehicle ID, and lastly parking slot ID. So there we have it. Now that we have done booking, we need to inform the user that the information has been booked. So I'm just going to do send a simple message to the user. So we'll use a scaffold messenger and display a snack bar. So the content will be a text widget, and it will say you have successfully booked your parking slot. And now I want to tell them which slot that they've booked. So I'm just going to proceed to define a variable called slot is equals to the selected slot and get the key name and display for them the name. So it will be slot. So there we have it. So next thing now is to test this whole thing, and now we should be able to book a whole parking session for a user. So let's just proceed to our simulator. So if I end up clicking on, maybe let's just use the IE 1E. If I click on park slot IE, it says could not find this column of parking detail in the schema. It still says you've successfully booked your parking slot. So let's check what the problem would be. Save parking detail. Select. Okay, first, when we set this or when we send this message, you're not checking if there's a success in terms of this specific function. As you have seen, we have gotten an error where it says there's no parking slot ID column, and that's because in the parking details table, if you remember, we forgot to add a specific column called the parking slot ID. So we went and proceeded to create the other tables, but we did not come back to create the column parking slot ID in the parking details once we created the parking slot table. So I will just head over back to our tables, go to our parking detail table, and just add that. So as you can see, in our parking detail, we do not have a column called parking slot ID, or let me just show you from here. We do not have the parking slot column, and that's what was missing. So let's just create that column. And then we'll just give it the data type int8. And then now we create a relationship between, let's just select the schema, the right schema, which is parking, referencing to the parking slot. So we're going to create a relationship between the parking slot table and the parking detail table using that column parking slot, and then we reference it to the primary key column of the parking slot table, and then just click on save. Wait, so it has already created that. Let's just wait. So we now have our column. Back to our code. Something else that I did that wasn't right is, if you check here, we're just waiting for the request to process, but still it ends up calling this specific message, which is you have successfully booked. So I'm thinking maybe we can take all this and go and define it in this specific function, in that if the data is not empty, that means the message has been sent. We just proceed to define that. So now we won't have this selected slot. So what we can do is maybe redefine let's just remove it. Just tell the user that they have success, because they'll get to see the information in the booking details tab. So I'll just leave it as that, const. Let me set this. So it needs to be here. That means when the information has already been added. So those are the two mistakes I did. I hope you've understood. So let's just try and book once more. So I'm going to book 1D. Let's try 1D. Pack slot ID. Error, null value in common status. Okay, let me see. I think I created a column called status, which we do not need. And it should not be null. I don't need this status. So I'll just remove this. Click on save. Okay, let's do this again. So let me just pick 1E again and click on pack slot IE. You have successfully booked your parking slot. That was quite fast. Let's see if we have actually saved it. So in our parking details table, as you can see, we have saved our information from the parking date, the entry time, the duration of hours. Remember, we set it as 3 hours. The parking area, which is downtown, the vehicle ID in the parking slot. Great. So that's cool. So now we head over to the parking slot table and check if the parking slot ID 11 has been set to false. Parking slot ID 11, this one, has been set to false. So that means in our UI, we need to be able to see we need to first navigate the user back. Let me just add that part. Start. Well, that's fine. The logic is working. Then data.push named. Just direct them to home. So I'll just come here and select and refresh. Let me just go back. I want to see if I'll still get from downtown. Proceed. 3 hours. Proceed. If I select fast flow, as you can see, the IE has been booked already, so it's no longer available. So that's book ID. Or let me just check. Let me pick another parking area, like beach side. Proceed, and then select maybe 2 hours, and then we just select a different vehicle, and then I just proceed, pick the basement, and pick B6, and then I park this specific one. You've successfully booked your parking slot. Great. So that means if I head over to the beach side again, let's say I'm just trying to book again basement, you can see B6 has been booked, so it's no longer available for booking. Great. So now we want to see all the information in the parking details, and we'll need to display it over here now in the booking tab. So this is our next task. So I'll just head over to booking. Let's see. I click on widgets. So next place, booking. So this is a specific screen that we need that shows the total fee, that shows a list of all the booking details, bookings that we have made. Great. So let's close. Let me just leave it as is. So we'll start by displaying the list, and then we'll proceed to come to the total fee paid. So our list is here. So I'll put this in a future builder. Future builder. So for our future, we're going to use the function get all bookings. We should have something like that. Here it is. So that's the one that we're going to use. So I'll just call the parking repository class and call get all bookings. And then for our builder, we can now return our list view. There we have it. So let's define our type of list map string dynamic, because that's what the type that's returned from Supabase, and we'll call a variable response, and we'll get it from snapshot.data, and then handle null safety. Yeah. So we'll do a check if response dot is empty. We call our widget empty widget. So let me just enter this quickly. I can even copy it from one of our, just head over to home, empty widget. We have one here, and then we just change the message. Import the package, and we change the message to no bookings made yet. Wait, let's work on our get all bookings. So we'll set this to async, do our try. Inside here, we define the data variable, then call our Supabase client, schema, define the schema, which is parking, define our table, which is parking detail. Then we do a select, and we're going to select all, and also we're going to select some information about the parking area. We cannot display the parking area ID to a user, so that's why we'll do an inner join, where using the parking area ID we get more information, like the information about the parking area. Close that. Then we're going to do a where clause, where the ID column, the column user ID, sorry, we have a column called user ID in the parking details table is equals to, we get it from our provider. Then we just want to order it based on the ID. Then that's pretty much it, because it will either return an empty list or a list with information. So let's just return it instead of defining it. So I think that's all. So back to our booking. Now that we have this, the response, okay. So now we can come here. Let's just add everything. Then we now go and head over to the interface and test. So we'll just first start by doing our item count as response.length. Response.length. Great. The next thing we're going to do is the information here. So we'll remove const. So just going to call the response list, get the index, and then it will return information about the parking area. So that's what we need. So it will come in a key called parking area, and it will come as an object of its own. So it will also have its own key values, and the key that we need is name. So that's how it's going to look like. And then now for the time, I think for the time we can set it here at the top, because it will be quite extensive for us to, because in this point we're getting the date, we're getting the entry time and the exit time. So we can just define variables for them, then proceed to just plug them over here. It'll just be inside here. I'll just define a string called formatted parking date. So I'll need to format this date that's coming in, and I'll need a date format. So for me to use a date format, I'll need the INTL package. Let me just check if we have it. And then we'll format it with, I want it to display the day and the month. So we'll have D in the month. Let me just import this in this class. And then we're going to call the format method and then define date format. To pass. This is how it's being saved. So just passing it and picking now the value that's coming from Supabase. So that's for packing date. So this is how it's saved in the Supabase. So we're passing it to this method format so that it can format it to day and month. So that's for formatted date. Let's go for entry time. So we'll say string formatted entry time is equals to date format. And set it as HH, hours, minutes, and then displays either AM or PM format. Doing the same thing, we're picking the date format. Whatever has been set, pass, then pick our value, response, index, entry time, and lastly, the entry time, the concept will be the same for exit. So I'll just call it this exit time, and then I just define this as exit time. So we have those three. So back to our text widget, we'll define it as, so we'll have the formatted packing date. Let me just do this population, and then we'll have the formatted entry time to the formatted exit time. Close that. Lastly, we're remaining with the fee. So for the fee, we'll just call it from, so we'll have, I need the dollar, and then we'll have response, get the index, get the key, we'll find it in the parking area key. Then we proceed to pick the parking fee. Parking fee. And then we just close it. Let me see. Put. Lastly, do we have anything else? Now it's on this part of tapping. We'll need to define other arguments that will go to the parking timer. But otherwise, the list we should be able to populate what's in this in Supabase. So back to our simulator, let me just log in. Booking, correct. So we have two bookings, which is very correct. We did these two bookings just previously, and it displays the time and the name of the parking area and the cost, which is very okay. Great. So now I need to do the total fee, and then now we can proceed to go to the parking timer, which is this section. In this section, as I say, the timer is not, I haven't added any logic to it. What we need is now to look at the view details, and it should display the correct vehicle number, the correct parking area, parking slot. This is where the user gets all the information and the total parking fee, the correct information. So here there's nothing much we're going to do. It's just going to navigate us to this section where we'll get to view this section and populate the right data. So for the total fee paid, we'll find it at the top here where we had set. So I'm just also going to add a future builder, but let's first check in the parking repository if we have that function, which I think it was get total fee. Yep, we do. So let's add logic for this. So what we're going to do, of course, you may be asking, are we going to use aggregate functions? Apparently, in this case, we're not going to use aggregate functions because it's like it's not yet being supported on the that section. Maybe in the other frameworks or the other languages that are being supported by Supabase, but for that, I haven't seen where we can be able to implement aggregate functions. There's a place where you need to enable aggregate functions in Supabase, but once you've done that, I've tried to implement it with that and it hasn't yet been successful. There's a specific error that I think most of us have been getting. Hopefully, once they sort that out, we're going to be able to use that. But in this case, now we're going to just use code to just iterate through the data that we're going to get from Supabase and just do our own application in our code. So let's do that. It's a bummer, I know. So I'll just set this to async. And then I'll just do a try, call my catch. Then inside here, we're going to define a variable, call our Supabase client, and define our schema, parking, define our table. So we're getting this information from the parking detail, but not just the parking detail. We're going to do an, the parking detail has the parking area ID, and through that parking area ID, we'll get information about the parking fee for each parking area. So it's definitely an inner join. So we'll just do a dot select and we'll just proceed to call the parking area, and what you need is a parking fee, no other information from the parking area table. Find the where clause. So we're just going to check where the user ID is equals to, get it from our provider. Simple as that. So what it's going to return, it's going to return a list of parking fees for the specific parking bookings. So we're expecting a list in our case of two that contains two items or two parking fees for downtown and I think beachside. Once we get that, I just want to define a variable called total fee is equals to 0. Then we're just going to do a for loop and we're going to check through the total fee, the data that is the list that we're getting, which is data. And inside here, we're going to define parking area is equals to, from each record, there's a key called parking area. Okay. And then, which is of type map, string, dynamic. And then inside there, now we'll just pick the total fee is equals to, or we want to sum it up inside here, is equals to the parking area where we'll get the parking fee and define it as a number. Just close this and make sure I define it to double. So that's how we're doing this. And then I'm just going to return the total fee. So that's the logic that I'm putting. So we've headed over to the parking detail table, and then we've gotten all the parking fees for this for each parking information. And in our case, we're expecting two items. And then we've proceeded to check where the user ID is for this specific user ID. Wait, I've defined a simple variable that will be, during iteration, it will be, the values will be added to it. So when we get the specific parking area, which is of type map string, we'll proceed to get the parking fee inside it with a key parking fee. And then whenever we get it, remember we set it as double, as a number in the table. We'll always add to this variable. And the result, after the iteration, the result is what we're going to return from this specific function. So we need to test this. So just proceed to the booking, and I think we're going to use a future builder so that in case of any changes, it's able to update automatically. It's able to listen for any change. So inside here on the rich text, I'll just call the future builder. And then we'll call parking repository and get total fee. And for our builder, we'll return our rich text. Inside here, we'll just define, expecting a double to be returned. So we'll just get it from the snapshot.data, handle our null safety to 0, and then we just come here and call it. As you can see, it's 18, which is very right, because the first one is 8, the second one is 10. 8 plus 10, that's 18. We're done with that screen. So now we need to go to the parking timer, but we need to pass for it arguments. So I need to redefine its root. So I'll just pick the root, the code from here. Head over to parking timer, define its own root name, called timer, head over to main.dart, look for parking timer. Instead of coding it again, root name, then I'll need to get the arguments. So just head over to parking timer and do the same. Pick the import the class. There we have it, and then I'm just going to go back to our booking and now define it here. So I'll just say parking timer dot root name. Need to import this root name, and then define the arguments, which will be parking arguments, and then return response and get the index. And that's what we'll be passing here. Once we come here and we have that information here, we'll access it using this variable. And since, as I said, in that specific parking timer, we do not have any logic that involves Supabase, all I have to do is head over to the place where I'm calling or navigating the parking ticket and just pass the arguments to the parking ticket class, because that's why we need that logic to be displayed. So I'll just do the same thing I've done on the timer and define a root name, ticket, and just say ticket. I need this to get whatever has been passed. Define it here, import parking arguments, and then I'll just head over to main.dart and redefine the root. So it will be parking ticket root, and then I'll go back to the parking timer. Yes. Then proceed to call the parking ticket, passing it the argument that it needs. So I'll just say parking ticket root name, and then we define the arguments, which will be the parking arguments, and we'll be passing the args variable for picking the parking area information. And there we have it. So I'll refresh this because I have changed a number of routes over here. Booking tab, click on beachside, and click on view details. So now we selected beachside, so that means our parking area should display beachside. We get the vehicle number, we get the name. So the argument that we passed on this screen should allow us to get all this information. So now let's populate everything correctly, and we should be done with this specific tab. So back to our parking ticket. So we'll start off by let's start with the name. The name of the vehicle and the vehicle number, and to get that we have a specific function for that. Get specific vehicle. Here we have it. Let's work on it. Do a try. Sorry, async. Wow. And then we just do a try. Call our catch. Set our catch. Sorry. Now let's add some logic here. So we'll just return, call our Supabase client, and we'll be communicating with the vehicle table, which is in our public schema. So we just proceed to call from vehicle table dot select, and then we need dot equal, where the column ID is equal to the vehicle ID, because that's what we have. Back to our parking ticket, the future, let's see where, here's the name. So these two, the name of the vehicle and the number, they're in one row. Genius. So I'll just define a future builder on top of this. Future builder, and then call the parking repository class get specific vehicle, and we're going to pass, let me just make sure we can all see this. So we need to pass in the vehicle ID, and we'll get it from our arguments. Parking area, we have a key called vehicle ID. Then define our builder and return our row. Great. So inside here, we'll just do the regular get our snapshot.data. It will come in form of a list. And then once we have that, we'll proceed to add the place where we had set Lexus. We need to change that. So we'll just, that was a car model, right? So we'll just do a response.isEmpty. If it's empty, we'll just set it as empty string, else we just proceed to call. And we're just expecting a list with only one item, so we just the first index. We should return just one row for specific vehicle ID, right? Ideally. So we just need the first index, and then we get the key car model. Remember, since the ID columns in our tables are primary keys, they have to be unique. So if we pass, if we send a vehicle ID of 1, it should return only one type of record. It can't bring in 2. So that's why we have set the index as 0, because it will come with just one item. So we have set the car model. Then now let's define the vehicle number. We just do the same thing, response.isEmpty. If it's not empty, we just pick the first index and get the key car number. So if I save this, we do have the information. So we had Lexus, and there's a 4XP9 4884. Just confirm. As you can see, we do have a Lexus of 4XP9 4884 of user ID 4, which is us. Okay, that's cool. It's just a coincidence I had set a static text called Lexus, so I had to confirm. So now let's go back to our logic. Next thing is the parking area. So therefore the parking area will be quite simple. Just call the arguments.parking area. Parking area, and pick the key called name. And if we save that, sorry, We won't get it straight from here. We'll need to pass. We'll get the name from a key called parking area, and then that's when we'll get the name. So let's try and check. Because remember it was beachside. As you can see, we have beachside parking lot, correct? Now let's get the parking slot. So for the parking slot, we'll need a certain function. And we're just going to put this whole thing in a future builder. But let's first go to the parking repository, get specific slot. Here we have it. Let's add logic to this. I'll do an async, try, catch. Then inside here, we do a return, await, call our Supabase client, call our schema, which is parking. We're accessing the table parking slot. Do a select. We just want everything, all, where, using the EQ method. Specify the column ID where the ID is equals to the slot ID. We return that. So back to our parking ticket. Find a future builder. Get the parking repository function, which is the get specific slot. Pass in the slot ID. We'll get it in the key parking slot ID. Find the builder, which will return our column. Choose that. And then we just remove this const. And then we'll just specify our text to display the correct parking slot name. So just do a response. We need to define whatever is returned. And say if response dot is empty, else return. Remember, we're getting an information for a specific slot ID, so it should be unique. So we expect the list to come with only one item, but just in case it doesn't, so that means it has to be the first index, which is 0, ideally. And then we pick the key name. And I'll just do that and save. So we should be able to get our parking slot, which is B6, correct? And then now let's work on the time, the duration, and the date together. So for the time, I think I'll define this guys here at the top. That's the best place to do it. For returning scaffold, remember we had the format, the way we were formatting the date, the time that's coming back from Supabase. So I need to sort that, and we already have it in the booking, so I don't need to do it again. This is what we need. Just copy this over the parking ticket and just paste it here, import the package. And then I'll just come here and define, instead of response, we need to define parking area entry time. Parking area exit time area. So we need to pass them somewhere here where the time is time. So for time, we now set it over here. I'll remove the const. So we'll have formatted entry time, formatted exit time, great. And then for duration, So we'll call the argument dot parking area duration, key duration. We have a const. Let's remove that. We have our hours, and lastly we have date. Parking date. There we have our date. Now the last thing that's remaining is a total fee. So to get the total fee, we just need, we'll define a double, just saying total fee is equals to args dot parking area. Proceed to get the parking fee, parking area first, and from that object we'll get the parking fee. And once I have it, I need to calculate it with the duration, which we set as, it's just a matter of picking this, it's in the key duration. So once we have, because this one will come in form of integer double. So if we try and come and bring it here and change this, remove const, we'll have our total value 16. So the fee was, I think it was 8, and then the duration is 2 hours. So 8 times 2 is 16. Great, and we are done. So we're done with displaying the correct information in terms of the parking ticket. The user is able to see the vehicle, the specific vehicle, the parking slot in which parking area, between which time, how long will it take, and the total parking fee. Click on done. So in a advanced scenario, when you click on, instead of done, we would have like proceed to pay using maybe a Stripe payment or any other type of payment. So what we are remaining with is a profile tab, and in a profile tab we just need the user to be able to display the right information about the user, which is the name and the email address, and also get their vehicles so that we get to display their vehicles from Supabase, and just that, and will be done on the profile section, and also on my favorites. So in my favorites we also want to display the right parking areas that are the user's favorite and be able to search. So let's do those 3 functionalities and we should be done. So we'll head over to the profile with that screen. So we have a part where we're displaying the name and the email address. So you can just pick this two and wrap them with a column, and then proceed to call the future builder. And we're going to just define the specific function we're going to use. So back to the repository class, the function that we'll need will be get user profile. So we can start working on it. So I'll delete this, set our try, and catch, set as a sync. Then we'll proceed to call our Supabase client. We're interacting with the profile table, and we're doing a select, and our where clause will be, we want where the column ID is equals to the user ID. So we'll get our user ID from our provider. And there we have it. So back to our profile, I'll just proceed to call the repository class. And then for our builder, return our column. Let's get our data from snapshot. Handle null safety. Now that we have that, we can now add the print out the right information. So we just do a check. Is empty. It's empty, we leave it as an empty string. Else we'll proceed to call the name. We'll get it from the first index because we are picking from a specific row of ID, of a specific ID. We're expecting a list, but the list should have one item. And we're going to pick the first item, which is in the first in the index 0, and then we proceed to get the information, which will be name. So we'll define the key as name. So we'll do the same for the email. So we'll check if the response is empty. Else, we'll proceed to call response, the first index, and call the key email address. So there we have it, janedoe@gmail.com. Okay, next is my vehicles. So for my vehicles, I won't complicate it as much. So right now how it looks in terms of design, when you click on my vehicles, it has default list of vehicles. So instead of having this default car numbers, let's populate the right information. So we have our show model bottom sheet here. So inside the container, or before the list view, let's do that. Inside the container, I'll call the future builder. Then we need to define a specific function in the repository class. Let's just find it, get my vehicle. Here we have it, get my vehicles. And we already inserted the code, which is great. So let's just proceed to call it. And return our list view. Wait. And proceed to get our data from snapshot. Handle null safety. Now that we have that, we can proceed to say if response that is empty, we'll proceed to just get our empty widget. We have some examples here. Let me just find it. Like this one. I'll just copy it and paste it here. Import the package and then change the text. It should say no vehicles added yet. And then if it's not empty, let's populate the right list. Starting with the item count. This will be response.length. Then the next thing will be the text itself. So we'll just say pick response, index. Then we specify the key, which will be car number. Let's remove the const, then we click on save. Let's view it. My vehicles. So there we have our 3 vehicles directly from Supabase. That's correct. So lastly, let's look at my favorites. So let's display the favorite parking areas for this user and then get to search. So we have my favorites here. So we need to navigate to the favorite screen. which is this. So this is the part we'll work on. We'll use the future builder. And in our repository class, we'll need a function called getMyFavorites. Now let's work on this. We'll do a try. Set the catch. Set this to async. Inside here, all I have to do is return the result straight. Await, call our Supabase client from favorites table. And we want to do a select of the ID and the parking area information using the parking area ID in the favorites table. And lastly, we need a where clause where user ID is equals to our user ID, which we'll get from Supabase provider dot user ID. There we have it. Back to our favorite class. Proceed to call it getMyFavorite. Define our builder, which will return our list view. Great. We come here and get the data from the snapshot. Response is equals to snapshot.data handle null safety. Then we'll do a simple check. If response.is empty, we'll proceed to call our empty widget, which I can just pick from here. Let's import the package. Then find the correct subtitle, which will be no favorites available yet. We have that. Next, we're going to go to now populate the right information here. So we'll have on item count, we'll have response dot length. Remove the const. Proceed to define response index parking area. Then we get the name. Next is the description, which will be same as this, but location text. And then for the parking area, we need to change this. We had changed the route. It will always be parking area dot route name. Then we define the arguments, which will be the parking arguments, which in our case will be response index parking area. There we have it. And then on press, we have a section where we'll get to remove the specific parking area as a favorite. So let's see if we can delete our list. So currently it's empty. Will not find a relationship between favorite and parking area in the schema cache. Okay. Supabase lacks support on cross-schema joins directly. That means joining two tables across two different schemas in one database. In our case, we're trying to join two tables, the favorite table and the parking area table, which are in two different schemas, the public schema and the public parking schema. So in that case, we'll need to introduce a view statement. A view statement in SQL is essentially a virtual table based on the result set of an SQL query. So unlike a physical table, like the ones that we have created so far, a view does not store data itself. Instead, it stores a query that is run every time the view is accessed. So the purpose of a view is just simply to simplify complex queries. In our case, we're just trying to join two tables from different schemas, which is not logic that has been abstracted by Supabase yet. So you may be asking, what's the difference between a view statement and database function? So a view in SQL is a virtual table based on a select query that simplifies the complex query that you may have, and it's often used for read-only access. So in our case, this is just what we need. We just need to select a list of favorite parking areas for a specific user without any modification, and we do not need to perform any complex logic other than just read what we get from this virtual table. If we needed any extra calculations or added logic and expected to return different types of results, we will definitely use database functions, which can return different types of results and values, sets, or even tables. So while views are limited to querying data, functions are more flexible and can include procedural logic, as we discussed earlier on. But in our case, we're going to create a view statement. So let's get to see how to create a view statement on Supabase. So we'll head over to our dashboard. And inside here, the first thing I'm going to do is head over to the SQL editor, and we're going to create a query. So we're going to call the create command, and we want to create a view. Let's give it a name. So we'll give it the name favorite parking areas view. Okay. But now I want this virtual table to be stored in the public schema. So I need to specify that. It's an actual virtual table. So we're going to get to see it in the public schema. Then let's define our select statement. So we want to select, and then we're just going to do a select all for now. We're going to select from the favorites table, which is in the public schema, and give it an alias name of F. Then we're going to proceed to do an inner join between the favorites table and the parking area table. So you're just going to call inner join. The parking area table is in the parking schema, parking area, and give it an alias name of P on F parking area ID, that's the column that's in the favorites table, is equals to the ID column in the parking area table. And we're done. So instead of selecting all, I thought I could just pick what I need from the favorites table will be the ID. And then I will need the user ID. That's what will help us select the favorites table for a specific user. And then I'll need the rest of the information here from the parking area, okay? But now here's the thing. In the parking area, we have a column called ID, and the favorites table, we have a column called ID. So there'll be a conflict. So what we can do, we can head over to the table editor, and I'll just edit the favorite table because that's the one does not have many relationships. And I'll change the column name ID to favorite ID and click on save. Once I've done that, I'll just proceed to the SQL query, and where we had set ID, I'll just define it as favorite ID. Great. Now we can select all of this and run this query, and it is successful. So now we expect a virtual table called favorite parking areas view. So if I head over to the table, as you can see in our public schema, we have a virtual table over here. And when we access this view, that's when we get to see all the information. So it's an inner join between the favorites table and the parking area table, and it displays the columns that we have selected. But now we want to be able to specify based on the user ID, which is pretty easy. So we can just create a simple query. Now you can do a select statement, a simple select statement, and say select all from our view is in the public schema, and then I'm just going to call our view here, the view name, and then just define where the user ID is equals to 4, because that's the user ID that we're currently using. If I run this, I'll be able to see my record. If I run a different user ID, it says there are no rows available. Great. So this is how to test a view statement in the SQL editor. So now we have this. So how will we be able to convert this query in our Flutter application? So let's head over to our editor, back to our editor. A few things will change. So first things first, So we have our Supabase client, and then we're going to say dot from. We're going to, whatever the table we're going to set here is our new virtual table. So we just head over and copy it. Favorite parking areas view. So I'll come and paste it here. And then we're going to select all. And then we're going to do where the user ID is equals to Supabase dot user ID, where we have stored our user ID. So the only thing we have done is we have changed. Now we're using a different table to access all the information that we need, and we have the access to be able to define the where clause, because we don't want all the information about the favorite parking areas. We want based on a specific user ID. So we can try and test this now. Back to our and then now in back to our interface, as you can see, we had specified response index. Then we're expecting an object inside that has the key parking area and also holds another key called name. In our case now, it won't come in that way, because now it will come back in terms of one object, and there'll be a key called name. Let me just show you from this. So if we go back to our virtual table, so we're expecting one object that will just have the key ID, user ID, name, everything will be put together. So we don't need a key called parking area back here. We just need a key called name. So I'll just remove this and also remove the location text. So back to our logic, our simulator. Let's try and test this. In our profile, my favorites, there we have it. We get to see our favorite parking area. You can see how fast it was. So great. So we've been able to learn about view statement. And now in this search feature or functionality, we'll get to implement or call our database function. If you remember, we talked about database functions, but we did not execute it. Now let's finally execute it. If you can't remember, here's our database function, which is this. This is the one that we created. So we'll get to call now this function finally and pass it the required arguments. So let's just do that. I'll just head over to the repository class and look for our function called search favorite, and add our logic here. So we'll just have a try and a catch. Let's set this to async. Then inside here, we'll return, do an await, call our Supabase client, and we're going to call a specific method called RPC, the remote procedural call. Remember, we mentioned that how to access the database function is through this, and I left a link on how to that explains all that. So now we're going to proceed to call now a database function. So back to our Supabase, we have this name, search favorite. This is what we're going to copy. Go back to our editor and paste it. Great. The next thing we need to do is now define our input parameters. So we have two based on our function. We have the user ID and the search text. So let's add those two. User ID, which we'll get it from our provider. And search text, which we'll get from whatever we have passed in this function. And then lastly, we'll do a dot select. And we are done. So it's as simple as that. So we defined this database function earlier on. That's why it's now easy to just call it. So back to our design, we have the search parking area. We'll need to modify it. So we have here on change. So the first thing we'll do is check if the value dot is empty. We need to do, it's something that we also did on the home screen. Let me just define some variables here that I need. We need a bool search is equals to false. And then we have a search list here. Okay, that's correct. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a check where I say if search is true, else. And then in our list view here, instead of the response, we'll pass in the search list. Search list. Search list. We won't need a future builder. Search list. We won't need all this, so I need to delete it carefully. There we have it. Search list. So we want, if there's a search being done, the result that comes in, we display the list view based on a search list. Else, we'll proceed to display based on the response that we get from the get my favorites. There's a simpler way of doing this. I'm just making it, which we can easily do. We'll get to change at some point. But for now, that's what I'm doing. So I'm just doing a check. If value dot is empty, that means there's no search being done. I'll just define the search as false. Else the search is true. And then I'll proceed. Define the search list. Await. Then we'll call the packing repository and call our function. I'll just set this to async. We need search favorite. Let's pass in the search word, which is a value. And if it comes in empty, it returns an empty list. They'll just come and do a set state. So simple as that. And there's nothing else to change here, so we can try and test this. So if I decide to search downtown, I cannot find the function public search favorite. Okay, let's see. Did we execute it? Let me just check. So it's executed. Let me see. There we have it. I had defined the user ID with a hyphen, with an underscore instead of user ID as one word. So we get to search. I think we need to set another parking area as a favorite so that we get to see. So I'll just set city center, save as favorite, profile, my favorites. There we have it. So if I try and search for city, there we go. There we go, downtown. And when we go back, it displays all the list of all the favorites again. Great. So we have officially completed the last functionality that revolves around the app based only on Supabase database. I hope it has made sense and you've gotten to learn a number of things. We started off by understanding what a database is and the basic concept that involves. We looked at our database schema, how we're going to design it. We created a number of tables in different database, in our different schemas. We're able to manage indexes, handle joins and relationships, deal with keys, define a database function, and also define a view statement, and also have a look at row level security in the basic way. Because remember, we're coming in as unknown users. So in the next part, we're going to look at Supabase Auth, where now we get to come in as authenticated users. See you then.